US President Donald Trump's threat to impose 100% tariff on Russian exports, including oil and equivalent secondary tariffs on countries importing Russian goods if Russia does not agree to a peace deal with Ukraine within the next 50 days, has now been echoed by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Now, the NATO Secretary General warned countries like India, China, and Brazil that the 100% secondary sanction would be imposed if they continue trading with Russia, particularly in oil and in gas. Now, he urged these countries to put pressure on the Russian President Vladimir Putin to go in for the ceasefire. India, of course, has made it very clear. India's primary responsibilities are to the people of India, and that's the overriding factor in oil procurement. Of course, there is also a contingency that India has in place for a pre-2022 situation, but India's main role, as the government's made it very clear, is to seek the best deal for the people of India.
This is New India under Prime Minister Modi. And New India does not appreciate being bullied, dictated, and especially threatened. And that's a lesson being learned the hard way by the West. India has pushed back strongly after NATO and US threatened tariffs or sanctions on nations continuing to buy oil from Russia. The MEA has categorically stated that securing India's energy needs is an overriding priority and reminded the West not to apply double standards.
Securing energy needs of our people is understandably an overriding priority for us. In this endeavor, we are guided by what is there on offer in the markets, as also by the prevailing global circumstances. We would particularly caution against any double standards on the matter.
Remember earlier, Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri had cleared India's stance that New Delhi has diversified its import sources and won't be bullied into cutting ties with any particular supplier.
India has diversified the sources of supply, and we have gone, I think, from about 27 countries that we used to buy from to about 40 countries now. I'm not worried at all. If something happens, we'll deal with it.
But with deep discounts and stable flows, Russian oil currently makes up nearly 40% of India's crude basket. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had earlier this week issued a blunt warning to India, among others, cautioning that they could face severe economic penalties if they continue doing business with Russia.
If you are the president of China, or the prime minister of India, or the president of Brazil, and you are still trading with the Russians and getting the oil and the gas in, and you sometimes even resell it for a higher price, know that if this guy in Moscow doesn't get serious about peace talks, I will slam secondary sanctions on you of 100%.
Earlier this week, Trump warned of sanctions on nations buying Russian oil if Moscow doesn't strike Ukraine peace deal in 50 days.
It's a horrible war, and it should be stopped. And so if it's not done, if we don't have an agreement in 50 days, that's what we're doing, secondary tariffs. But we can do secondary, we're probably talking about 100% or something like that.
But India's message remains loud and clear. Energy security trumps politics, and pressure tactics of Trump and his pals just won't work on Modi's India. Bureau Report, India Today.
So, this threat of 100% secondary tariff, is this an empty threat? Can the US and will the US and NATO carry out this threat of imposition of 100% sanctions or additional tariffs on procurement of Russian gas and oil? And will this, if done, send the global economy in tailspin? Because prices right now are between $60 and $70 per barrel, may just shoot up to $130 per barrel or more? Or are these just pressure tactics, negotiation tactics of US President Donald Trump to put pressure on the Russian president to accept the ceasefire and sign the dotted line. Joining me on this India First special broadcast is Dr. Tara Kartha, former director of India's National Security Council Secretariat. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar joins me on this broadcast. India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan also with me on this. Geeta, we've heard the reaction both of Ranveer Jaiswal, Additional Secretary Minister of External Affairs, and the Petroleum Minister. But behind the scenes, is there concern? Would sanctions hurt India? Is that a real threat?
Well, Gaurav, the United States of America will firstly have to calibrate and recalibrate their decisions on the tariff policy, because the US president announced during the BRICS summit that there's going to be an additional 50%. Then with the Russian oil, 100%. And if you total all that up, how will the trade talks with US move forward then? It is going to be a real stickler. And then he goes on to announce that there is going to be a big deal with India as good and big as Indonesia. So there is a lot of confusion at this point in time in how DC is looking at New Delhi in terms of a trade deal and ensuring that there's clarity on tariffs. Having said that, the European Union, which had become very quiet on India procuring oil from Russia, and some of them also started saying that they understand why India is doing it. Today they come out and they say, well, they will have to be sanctioned. And Mark Rutte, no other than Mark Rutte himself, has come out and said it. But the fact of the matter is that, and which is what ME has very clearly said, India is going to secure her energy interests, one. And secondly, let's not have double standards. Like Dr. Jaishankar had once said, that India procures from Russia in a month what Europe does for lunch.
In a day. Oh, absolutely. Stay with me. Ambassador Sajjanhar, what would you make of this threat, first by the American president and then the NATO Secretary General?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gaurav. There's considerable confusion. You would recall that initially Lindsey Graham, senator, he had proposed, a bill in the Senate, in the US Senate, saying that, we are going to impose 500% additional tariffs on countries which are importing oil from Russia. Now, this has been brought down to 100%. I would really hope that it is used as a pressure tactic as far as Russia is concerned, to bring it to the negotiating table. As far as, this threat by Mark Rutte is concerned, Gaurav, if you permit, I will also add, in addition to the substance, that, there is going to be this 100%. There is a great deal to be desired in the tone and tenor of Mr. Mark Rutte's comment.
Yes.
In addition to the substance, he is not the prime minister or the president of any country. He does not have the authority to impose sanctions. Impose sanctions, NATO doesn't impose sanctions. Can NATO speak for EU? Meaning that it is threatening India, and the big countries like India, it is threatening that I'm going to, these are the words he uses, I'm going to impose sanctions. He has no authority whatsoever to impose any sanction, not 100%, not 0.5%. So, I take strong objection to what they are doing. And also, last word here, what Ranveer Jaiswal has said, these are, hypocrisy, because the Europeans are importing gas and oil. Last year, they imported worth $22 billion. Hungary and, Slovakia, they refuse to stop their imports of oil and gas from Russia.
I'll come to the double standards and hypocrisy in just a moment. But Dr. Tara Kartha, on the statement itself and the Indian response, your reading, and especially why would someone like a NATO Secretary General do this? What are the other games at play here?
I mean, this gentleman is an echo chamber for President Trump. You saw that in the NATO summit where he did pranam to Trump at various occasions and was literally all over President Trump, in the manner which I have never seen. I mean, he had his objectives, I don't know, but it was, if I were NATO countries, I would find it pretty humiliating. I 100% agree with what Ambassador Sajjanhar says. This man has no authority whatsoever. What does it mean NATO will put sanctions on us? Who are you to put sanctions on anybody? You've got nothing to do with it. Secondly, Netherlands itself takes 100% of its LNG from Russia. He's the Prime Minister of Netherlands. First, speak for your own country. So this is a, but however, I just want to look at the finer points of this. Though he's an echo chamber, what President Trump is trying to do is to end this Ukraine war, and I think I am with that. I don't like these
Yes.
sanctions talk for him, but ending the Ukraine war, yes. And they are
Geeta,
using us. Short of telling you to mediate, they are doing everything else.
no, they want to end the war, and yet they want to supply weapons to Ukraine. Everything that they do appears so ad hoc and so perfunctory in terms of their handling of this war for the past 3 years, both administrations actually. But Geeta, India also has a plan B in place. Petroleum Minister Hardeep Puri mentioned a contingency to revert to a pre-2022 situation. That perhaps only would happen, Geeta, if it's UN sanctions. Those are the only sanctions that India accepts, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. But yes, there have been times when we have agreed to US sanctions, not because of anything else, because US has become a very important strategic partner, and it has not to do with Russia, but more to do with Iran. Remember, when the US sanctions were, and they're also not UN sanctions, they're all American sanctions against Iran. India did seek a cut-out waiver for Chabahar port. And initially, when Russia was under sanctions under Biden administration, India did seek a cutout and a waiver for CATSA for our S400s. And so, yes, we do agree, but strategically so, where we think we need to be in a country, we ensure that we have our waivers there, but agree with a country like the United States of America for the better and the larger strategic interests of India. Having said that, we do not comply with country sanctions. The only sanctions we
Yes.
comply with are UN sanctions. So this is a choice India makes looking at her own interests, and UN sanctions India does not violate. So there's a huge difference there. In this case, India did think that cutting Russia out would be strategically detrimental to India, a country that has stood by India through decades, and is the reason why we went ahead and saw an opportunity in securing our interests. Having said that, it all also depends on the trade deal, the conversations that are happening or that just took place in DC and will continue to take place for an early trade deal between India and the United States of America. And should there be a requirement, India does not desperately need Russian oil. India survived without. In fact, we've only started buying Russian oil much after it was during the Russia-Ukraine war. So India
Yes.
can survive without too. But right now, securing energy interest is what is paramount and important. And the European countries will
Okay.
have to walk the talk, practice what they preach,
On that
stop
double
buying on the high
standards,
seas.
absolutely, and that's the point, Ambassador Sajjanhar, that you too had raised. You know, these blatant double standards of the European countries. India's exposed that. So, despite imposing sanctions on Russia after 2022, several European countries, including NATO members, continue to import Russian oil, gas, petroleum products directly or through loopholes. So, you know, are these facts to be put out for them to see, or they want to say one set of rules for the white man, another set of the rules for the rest of the world?
No, absolutely. I think that is something that, you know, we have to put it squarely, you know, to them, put it at their faces that, you know, what the discussions in the EU last month were, that EU is still proposing that by 2027, it will consider stopping imports of oil and gas from Russia. So it is just proposing in 2027. So it merrily continues. As I was saying earlier, you know, it is $22 billion of oil and gas that EU had imported last year from Russia. And if you compare it with the assistance that EU had provided to Ukraine last year, it was only $19 billion. So it is giving much more, you know, actually 16% money funds
Russia.
revenue more to Russia than it is providing to Ukraine. But I think that having been said, we will take care of our interests, of our overall strategic interests. And energy security is a very fundamental element. India is growing. India's economy is the fastest growing economy in the world. Our energy needs are growing. We are going into renewables, but fossil fuels are important for us. So I think we will do what it needs. We did, in 2019, when Trump got out of JCPOA, then we got out, we stopped importing oil from Iran. So far, we don't import any oil. But you can't have a world economy that you stop export of oil from Iran, from Russia, from Venezuela. And as you said very correctly, Gaurav, the prices of oil are going to skyrocket, and that's going to have a very deleterious impact on European economies also. So, they
Absolutely.
are really
Global
shooting
economies.
themselves in the foot.
And why are they doing this? Because clearly every country looks after its own interests first, Dr. Tara Kartha. India, of course, as Minister Hardeep Puri also pointed out, from 27 countries in mid-2000s to now, our oil procurement or energy procurement is from 40 countries. But this discounted Russian oil remains crucial to our energy requirements. I believe as of now it's between 35 to 40%. So is it fair to ask India not to procure from Russia or to consider a plan B? What are the bigger games at play here that the West wants to put this pressure on countries like Brazil, India, China, and will they agree?
I think it's a little bit of a puzzle because I was just looking at the statistics. In terms of Russia's seaborne trade, it is G7 country plus tankers which are taking Russian oil, which has risen from 35% to 56%. So it's their tankers which is shipping Russian oil. So it's going to hit them even there. I don't know how they're working out the insurance. I mean, that could be a possible thread where you withdraw insurance of shipping, which is carrying Russian oil. Let's see if that comes up. But like we said, in European Union, Druzhba pipeline is still functional. So while they are threatening you with XYZ, the end message of Trump, which Mark Rutte has missed out, is that he's telling you go and mediate with Russia. That is your message. Get Russia to stop the war. And that is okay, provided, he said 100% or something like that. I mean, that is what President Trump said. He's not sort of, going with that figure unnecessarily. And I completely discount whatever this NATO Secretary General says. It doesn't bother me. But if
they want India to negotiate, Ambassador Sajjanhar, the last 1 minute I have on this part of the show, if they want India to help, this clearly is no way to seek help. This in a way is trying to bully a country into trying to help you. And will countries like China, India, Brazil, can they be bullied in the manner in which NATO and America appear to be trying to do?
No, I think as I said, the tone and tenor of Mark Rutte's comments is as if they are living in the 19th century. When Netherlands had, the Dutch East Indies, etc., all of those. Those times are over. Indian, Chinese, and Brazil, I don't want to speak for them. I want to speak only for India. You can't come and you start bullying India. As far as India is concerned, even before the West had said, we had told Putin in September 22 in Samarkand on the sidelines of the SCO meeting that this is not a time of war. We did not want him to continue with the war. We wanted him to go to dialogue and diplomacy. It is the West that is coming to that position right now. Our position has been that from 3 years ago. And we will continue to take that position. Whenever we meet, we always tell, because the whole world is suffering. Developing world, the global south, is particularly suffering. So we need an end to this world. But this is not the way to go about it. That you hold a gun to the head of an individual and you say, or a country, and you say that you go and negotiate with them. That's not the way. And I don't think it will help matters any if this is the way they continue.
We'll track that story very closely, but Ambassador Sajjanhar and Dr. Tara Kartha for joining me here on the first part of India First on India's strong response. Many thanks. So is this crisis in West Asia now likely to expand and even escalate? Joining me on this developing story is Dr. Wael Awad. He's a senior political analyst and an international correspondent. Joins us on the show. Also with me is Ambassador Anil Thrigunayat, former ambassador to Jordan, Libya, and Malta. Dr. Awad, this conflict appears to be expanding in multiple directions and repeatedly. The current situation, is this a limited strike with a limited objective, or do you see wider strategic messaging here?
Well, thank you. I think the message is very clear here that the objective of destroying the Syrian army was achieved by bringing Ahmad al-Shara or Abu Muhammad al-Julani into the power in Syria by the Israelis and the American and the Turkish government. But now the second phase of destroying the infrastructure of the Syrian government and all these statues of the sovereignty of Syria, which have been existing since 1945. So by destroying the military bases and the defense ministry and the palace is a clear indication that Israel does not trust Julani, who is trying to implement its own policy in the region. As you know that the Golan is the Syrian Golan occupied
Yes.
1973 war, and Israel have discovered oil in that. And the tributary in those oil goes 65 kilometers south of Syria, which means that is inside the Syrian Quneitra, into Suwaida, into Daraa, where the fighting is taking place. So under the pretext of protecting the Druze minorities in Syria, Israel is trying to occupy this part of Syria because they wanted to control the oil of Syria. And also, they don't want to see any military presence in that part of Syria because the ambitious plan of Netanyahu is to expand in the future.
Okay. Ambassador Triguniat, is this also your appreciation? Is this just to address the Druze situation? Or, as Dr. Awad points out, there are wider strategic objectives, including securing the areas around that Golan Heights buffer zone and this quest for oil?
Of course, the protecting the Druze is essentially a ruse, and by Israel that is being deployed. They have already occupied the Golan Heights, which provides them the strategic advantage, the heights, the oil, as Dr. Abad mentioned. At the same time, Israel has not accepted al-Shara. He still considers al-Shara as a terrorist group, and he thinks that eventually they are going to come to fight with us. So there is, irrespective of the Americans' thinking, irrespective of the Arab endorsement of al-Shara, Israel has not reconciled to the fact. So they would like to create a demilitarized zone, occupy the southwest along with the Golan Heights. And as you know that the Israelis also have about 150,000 odd Druze people there. Many of them have been brought into their army. About 450 odd were killed, in fact, during this war with Hamas. And so far we have seen quite a lot of them. And this is something, I think it has nothing to do so much with this protecting the Druze in Syria. It is to create a division in the country. And as such, the country is divided because you have, they had the problems earlier against the Alawites. Then you have the Kurds,
Shias,
Kurdish
the
problem.
Sunnis,
And then
the
you also,
Kurds,
yes, so many minorities, so what Israel is trying to do is controlling the whole area so that it thinks that it has created a buffer and it cannot be challenged.
Okay. Dr. Awad, in your appreciation, in the days and weeks ahead, now there are calls for de-escalation. They're saying that perhaps US said there was a misunderstanding. You heard the Israeli Prime Minister, he's asking Druze in Israel not to cross over to the other side, just let the IDF do their job. In your appreciation, do you see an escalation in the days and weeks ahead?
I don't see an escalation currently because you see, American President Trump needed the Abraham Accord, and now they are putting pressure on the tactic of reaching to a peace agreement through the guns, and that's what Trump has been doing. And now Netanyahu is implementing the same thing. So therefore, applying pressure on the Syrian government to go for Abraham Accord and normalize relation with Israel, where they can surrender the Golan full permanently to Israel without claiming that it is a Syrian territory as per the UN Security Council resolution in this regard. So therefore, there is definitely an escalation going to happen as long as al-Shara does not challenge the Israelis' ambition in the region or the American continuous support of Israelis' hegemony in the region. I think he will remain in power till his mission is completed. And I think that's an interim phase, and he will remain in power as long as they are able to use him for their own. But having said that, I would say that this attack on Syria, definitely, it's a violation of international law, irrespective who is in power in Syria. This is a sovereign nation, whatever may come. And we know that the Israelis have been supporting and even treating the Daesh and Al-Qaeda and even Hayat Tahrir al-Sham during the civil war in Syria 2013-14. And even we saw Netanyahu at the makeshift hospital in Golan treating these patients, shaking hands with them and sending them back to Syria.
Okay.
And after they gained control of Syria now, by the way, Gaurav, they have been paying salary since 2013 as well to the mercenaries and to these factions of the Islamists. Israel.
So
and
using
now,
the
after-
Sunni Muslim radicals against the Shias of Bashar
Absolutely.
al-Assad. Ambassador Trigoniat, in your appreciation, is Israel opening too many fronts, or is Israel moving very systematically, degrading multiple threats, but one at a time?
Well, I think that Israel has really opened many fronts, but at the same time, it has also shown that with the support of the United States, it can handle all those fronts. And we have seen simultaneously it is killing people in Gaza. It is also taking on the West Bank. It's hitting people in Syria and Lebanon and elsewhere, and also continuing its problems with Iran. So I think that it has shown that it does have, despite all the stresses it faces, it has been able to handle militarily. It has been able to handle all these challenges so far. The other thing is that if you remember, then when Jolani came to power, at that time, the first thing that the Americans and the Israelis did was to completely demolish Assad's army and all its capabilities.
Yes. The
So
tanks,
therefore,
the
there was
aircraft,
nothing
the
really
entire
left.
military infrastructure was destroyed.
Yes.
The surface-to-air missiles, most important.
Truly. So now, of course, they are not left with the kind of power that you need to fight back the Israeli army, which is very sophisticated. But at the same time, they will be stressed. They were stressed we have seen it during Iran-Israel war, that they were stressed to a point and they had to run to basically asking the Americans to intervene. So there is a limit to which they can stretch themselves. Besides, Netanyahu himself is facing a lot of domestic turmoil and
Yes.
problems there. So that will also be, the role of Druze in the Israeli society by itself also is important in a sense, is that they don't consider themselves as Muslims per se. So they are
Yes.
more closer to the Judaism, Christianity, and other kind of, Ismaili system. So therefore, they can be a distant between the Arab and themselves. So that's what
So does
the
this help?
Israelis are trying to use it.
The last 30 seconds that I have on this part of the show, Dr. Awad, does this help, on the one hand, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to remain in power irrespective of the domestic issues within the country? And two, what is your thinking? Will the current regime in Syria, under American pressure or to remain in power, finally cede the territory that Israel wants around the Golan Heights permanently?
Well, look, I think what Israel wanted Netanyahu himself, he is unilaterally continuing this war to have because of his political career to survive in power. Secondly, there is a law in Israel also which is passed, does not even discriminate among the Druze. So if he thinks that he can use the Druze card in Syria because he wanted to protect them, I think he first should protect the Druze inside Israel, where he has already, they have passed a law which will have discriminations against them. So therefore, I think these are farce and these are a fake kind of a protection he's creating. The third thing is, which is important, Gaurav, is here the Syrian government has to survive. But the main objective of Israel is to break Syria, disintegrate Syria into small ghettos type of, so there will be a Christians, there will be a Druze, there will be Alawite,
yes.
and then you can claim and have the pretext that you need the Jewish state. So there is no question of Palestinian state at all inside Israel.
Is he succeeding so far in that attempt?
Well, he's attempting, but he cannot do anything. Israel cannot have the hegemony of a regional power in the region without the support of the United States. They cannot do it independently, by the way.
Which he does appear to have. Ambassador Trigoniat
Yes.
And Dr. Wael Awad for joining me here on this India Today broadcast. Many thanks. We are getting a reaction from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau that slammed the Wall Street Journal report. The AAIB in a statement has said it's come to our attention that a certain section of the international media are repeatedly attempting to draw conclusions through selective and unverified reporting. I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Amit Bharadwaj, who joins us for more on this. Amit, bring us details of what the AAIB are saying, and do they intend doing something about it or just issuing a statement like a press release earlier?
Well, Gaurav, as far as Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau is concerned, their mandate is to probe the AI 171 case rather than taking legal action against certain sections of the media, which has been repeatedly, possibly on purpose, making headlines in a way which were insinuations pinning down the responsibility on the crew or the pilot of AI 171, Captain Sabrawal and pilot Clive Kunder. And it's not the first report that was published today, which is in question. Rather, in fact, the headline that was given when the preliminary report of AAIB was out, that it was pilot's confusion would have led to the crash, suggests AAIB report, which was not the case at all. And we have at India Today reported every factual aspect of the AAIB report. And right from the day of crash, we have been reporting what's accurate, what is factually correct. But if we refer to the AAIB's statement today, they are saying that not only these are repeated stories, unverified claims that are being made, but definitive conclusions are also being made by certain section of the international media. Along with that, Gaurav, it has been also stated that at this point in time, there is no need to create an anxiety and anger amongst the people against India's civil aviation infrastructure and concerns around the safety of India's civil aviation.
Unless there's a bigger game at play here, is there a conscious effort to pin the blame on the pilots of Air India AI Flight 171 who are no longer here to defend themselves? And this certain section of international media, are they jumping to conclusions without conclusive evidence to indicate pilot error just on the basis of a mandatory preliminary report? Joining me on India First is Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor, former Director General Flight Safety and Inspections, and Captain Saurabh Bhatnagar, a pilot himself, formerly with Air India Express. Air Marshal Kapoor, you've read the report. What's your appreciation? And you've seen the clarification that's come from AAIB. Is there an effort to blame the pilots and save a company or systems of that company without a proper detailed investigation? These insinuations that are being made repeatedly?
Hey, Gaurav, good evening to you and the fellow panelists. There is a pattern, Gaurav. All Boeing accidents which have happened in developing countries before the accident investigation, I did a thorough research today after this Wall Street, and I said, let me see if there's a pattern. Yes, there's a pattern. And this pattern runs way back from 1997. 1997, there was a Silk Air crash in Indonesia. They blamed the pilot. It was 737. Thereafter, an Egypt Air aeroplane crashed in 1999. It was again a Boeing 767, and they, said like this. To our memory now, MH370, when it took off from Kuala Lumpur for Beijing, it was a Boeing 777 which disappeared over the ocean. And if you recall, you have covered that, I remember, that the pilot had mental issues. The pilot was not in the right frame of mind. Till date, we have not been able to find. Fast forward now, come to 2018. Lion Air crashes, Boeing 737 MAX. And thereafter in 2019, Ethiopian Airways crash. And in both these things, the narrative that was built up was say that the pilots were not well trained. They're modern aircrafts, and also they had a mental issue. Those pilots, who were in command at that time, were not, in the right state of mind. Here also, come to Air India 171 crash. The Wall Street Journal, 24 hours before the preliminary report is released on 12th, has an article going to say that most likely it is a fuel malfunction and most likely it is a pilot error. And hereafter, selectively, yesterday, this says that the pilot was stressed and he has 15,500 hours of flying. And if you see the pattern, all are Boeing aeroplanes and all from, global south. And I did my research today. In that, I just found out there is only one societal confirmed case wherein a commercial aircraft has been flown into the ground by the pilot, and that is a Germanwings aircraft in 2015.
That's right. That was the CFIT because that pilot was depressed. But I want to come to the, Are all facts in public domain so far, Captain Bhatnagar? No. The preliminary report also notes that 2018 FAA Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin that warns of fuel control switches on Boeing 787s and 737s, that they could have disengaged, locking mechanism, potentially allowing unintended movement. Should that be looked into by Boeing? Should that not be made into a mandatory airworthiness directive instead of now going in for selective leaks and blaming the pilots? Is that what appears to be happening in your appreciation?
Hi, good evening, Gaurav, and good evening, Air Marshal sir. This report, this narrative was set by Boeing not only much before. On 8th of July, there was a Air Current publication. They published an article regarding the same, that the probe is going towards the fuel control switches. Then Wall Street Journal came up a day before. Boeing is known to set up these kinds of narratives. Any accidents have happened, whenever these accidents happen, like in Lion Air cases, it was blamed that pilot's problem, but finally they realized that it is the faulty angle of attack sensor which led to the MCAS, cutting in. So now I am not surprised what is happening as of now, because under whose pressure I don't know, because Boeing has lot at stake. Because they are Boeing and Airbus, the only two aircraft manufacturing country in the world. If something happens to Boeing, or if any directions is given by the AIB to the Boeing or recommendation, they have to perforce ground the entire 787 fleet to carry out any kind of recommendation being made at AIB. AIB is an official investigation board of the country. And if that gives any recommendation, it is mandatory for the aircraft manufacturer to ground the fleet and tell all the operators across the world to carry out these kinds of recommendations made by the board. Do you think what will happen? What happened in the Lion Air case? Same thing. When the 73 MAX was discovered that it's an MCAS faulty sensor, the entire fleet was grounded. And how much Boeing had to suffer the losses. So what my opinion is that, yes, there is something bigger game is going on. That is why they are
There's a bigger game at play.
Yes,
Marshal Kapoor, the AIB report indicates the fuel switch moved to cut off, but there's no clear evidence that there was a pilot intent to do so. There's no evidence that mechanical failure has been ruled out. In your appreciation, what steps should be taken, whether it's a system issue, whether it's a fuel control system issue, whether there are other components at play? How long before we know that for sure, with the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder being probed?
I covered in your program other day, Gaurav, that 20 days after the complete FDR and CVR data was with the AIB, a better work could have been done, in my appreciation. Even if what has been put out is not adequate, it is in bits and pieces. The giving of one line of CVR, just this conversation, and rest not commenting on any other conversation, in my opinion, doesn't make much sense. In what context was this spoken to? What was the full conversation? After this conversation, what did the pilot say? What were the engine parameters recorded before it was cut off? Even if you are saying that it was manually cut off, as it appeared in the prelim report, but it has not come out very clearly, either in the AIB report. And to take, there's a saying in English called red herring. So as a red herring now, a new angle is being introduced, in my opinion, about pilots' mental health, which was never ever, discussed, and it has been a pattern which I just covered with you. So it's a common pattern with the global south, as we say now, or the developing countries, as we said earlier. Any accident happening in these countries, this is the general narrative that has been taken across. And in my
Captain
opinion,
Bhatnagar, go on, sir. Complete your point, sir.
The most experienced pilot, an examiner, a Czech pilot with 15,500 hours, and a 787 commander, why would he, do this action? It is bizarre, in my opinion.
Truly. And Captain Bhatnagar, in your appreciation, should there have been, for example, a multi-operator message to all 787 operators? Examine, check, revert, so that after 30 days, there is some more information that's available in public domain, point 1 and point 2. Should there have been a press conference, explain things in detail, instead of a 15-page report that leads to so much speculation?
Absolutely, you actually brought the correct point. The AIB should first of all have a initially press conference about this preliminary investigation report. Now, if you look at the report again, I'm seeing the same thing. The main aim of any preliminary investigation report, as per the ICAO Annex 13, Chapter 7, any high-profile accident, they have to they have to disseminate the data. Now you look at the data. What sir is saying? Data is only EFR about the engine. Now, if you put something in the paper that yes, they fuel control switches. Now, fuel control switches transition has got two meaning: either manual or by malfunction of any components by or sending an erroneous signal or software glitches. Now, if they had left only at that. If they had left only at that, that would have led to immediately some recommendation from the AIB for two birds Boeing to check for any mechanical or any software glitches. Now, how should they avoid that? So what they have done is now they have given two lines. One initially that one pilot said, why did you cut off? And later on they said another pilot, that one pilot said, mayday, mayday. Now, why can't the data of the CVR be published in the preliminary investigation report? Now, by writing this one line, they have clearly stayed away from the technical thing and pointed the finger directly to
and was
the
this then
pilots. That is
was
what,
this then
otherwise
deliberate?
they were forced to give they would have been forced to give the recommendation, because it can happen anyway, manual or electrical malfunction. So now how to tell the world? So how to tell the world? How to tell the
I've
Boeing
run
that
out of
it is
time
not
on this part of the show.